The freight car explodes without warning. Metal screams across the yard. A shockwave of heat and shrapnel tears through the cold Midwestern air. Sergeant Maya Carter drops behind a rusted signal tower, rifle pressed hard against her chest. She waits 3 seconds, then raises her scope. Something is wrong. A bullet hole sits in the steel panel beside her head. Fresh, clean. She never heard the shot. No crack, no muzzle flash, nothing. Someone fired first. Her radio hisses. Graves' voice comes through low and flat. "You're not hunting him anymore, Carter. He's hunting you." She sweeps the yard. Thermal reads clean. Nothing moves. Then a freight door swings open. Slow, deliberate. 60 yards out, the rail switch lever ticks sideways. Somewhere in the maze, he's rearranging the battlefield. She came in from the east perimeter, low and slow, the way Graves had taught her. No headlights, no radio chatter, just the sound of gravel shifting under her boots and the distant moan of wind pushing through hollow steel. The Harmon Freight Terminal had been decommissioned 8 years ago. Officially, the paperwork said the yard was seized by the federal government following a bankruptcy proceeding in 2016. Ownership transferred to a regional logistics holding company and then transferred again to a shell entity out of Delaware. 3 name changes, 2 ownership transfers, 0 operational activity, on paper. In reality, the yard still breathed. Carter had studied the satellite imagery for 6 hours before insertion. She knew the layout the way a surgeon knows an anatomy chart, not from experience, but from careful study. The main switching yard occupied the center, 42 sets of parallel rails, most of them rusted dark, connecting to a hub of sorting tracks that fanned outward like the legs of a dead spider. To the north, a row of maintenance sheds sagged under decades of disuse, their corrugated roofs buckled by winter ice. To the south, 3 massive overhead cranes stood motionless against the gray November sky, their cables hanging limp, their hooks swaying slightly in the wind. Between them all, the rail cars, hundreds of them, boxcars, flat cars, tankers, covered hoppers. They sat on every track in clusters of 5 and 10 and 20, some coupled, some isolated, their paint faded to the color of old rust and weathered concrete. They created corridors and dead ends in chambers, a maze within a maze. Standing in any one place, you could see perhaps 30 feet in any direction before a wall of steel cut your sightline. Carter paused at the perimeter fence and crouched. She pressed her back against a section of chain link that had been cut and reattached with wire. Someone's old entry point, long unused. The wire gave easily. She slipped through and let the fence settle behind her without a sound. Her mission parameters were simple. A covert military logistics convoy, 6 vehicles, classified cargo, would transit the county road running parallel to the yard's eastern boundary at 0340 hours. Her job was overwatch. Elevated position, eyes on the road. Report anything that moved in the surrounding terrain. Do not engage unless fired upon. Standard, clean, manageable. She had been given 4 hours to establish position. She had used 40 minutes of them crossing the half-mile of open scrub between the drop point and the fence. The rest of the time was hers. She stood now inside the yard and listened. The wind moved through the freight cars like breath through a pipe organ. Each car produced its own note, a low moan here, a hollow rattle there, a thin metallic whistle from a car with a broken door seal somewhere deep in the southern cluster. The sound was constant and layered and disorienting. It filled the ear and made silence impossible. Carter found that reassuring. Silence in a place like this meant something had changed. Sound meant the yard was doing what yards did, creaking, settling, breathing. She checked her watch. 23:47 hours. She moved deeper into the maze. The signal tower stood near the center of the yard. It was a remnant of the yard's active years, a steel-frame structure roughly 40 feet tall, topped by a small enclosed cab where switching operators had once sat and monitored rail traffic. The cab's windows were long gone. The ladder rungs were pitted with rust, but the structure itself was sound, the welds still tight, and its height gave a clear sight line over the tops of most of the surrounding freight cars. Carter climbed it carefully, testing each rung before committing weight. At the top, she settled into the cab and took a long look at the yard. From this elevation, the maze resolved itself. She could see the major switching tracks running north-south. She could see the 3 maintenance sheds, their interiors dark and still. She could trace the paths between freight car clusters, the gaps, the corridors, the dead ends. To the east, beyond the yard boundary, the county road ran straight and flat, pale gray in the moonlight. She set up her position methodically, bipod down, rifle oriented east toward the road, pack against the north wall of the cab to break her silhouette. She left 2 exit routes, the ladder and a drop onto a flat car roof 12 feet below if she needed to move fast. She keyed her radio. Overwatch established. Grid Kilo 7. Eyes on the road. The response came back immediately, patched through 3 relay stations, and still somehow managing to sound exactly like Graves. Copy that. How's the yard look? Big, empty, lots of steel. A pause. Then, rail yards are sniper hell, Carter. Too many reflections. Metal bounces sound. Bounces light. Your thermal's going to lie to you. I know. You think you know. You haven't worked steel before. She hadn't argued with that. He was right. Her previous deployments had been urban, concrete and glass, and the predictable geometry of city blocks. This was different. The freight cars absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night. Her FLIR scope would show warm signatures on every surface. Distinguishing a human body from a sun-warmed steel panel at distance was going to be a problem. What's the priority if I pick up movement in the yard? She asked. Observe and report. The convoy's the mission. Yard secondary. And if the movement is armed? Another pause. Longer this time. When Graves spoke again, his voice had a quality she recognized. The careful flatness he used when he was choosing words with precision. Then you use your judgment, same as always. She scanned the yard through her scope. The freight cars sat silent and still. The cranes didn't move. The maintenance sheds showed nothing on thermal. Cold and dark, just steel and concrete that had been cooling since sundown. She settled in to wait. 3 hours and 40 minutes until the convoy. The first figure appeared at 0:11, 2 hours. Carter saw him through her scope. A man in a heavy coat moving along the western edge of the yard, following a path between the fence and the outermost row of freight cars. He was carrying something. A bag, maybe. Moving without urgency, without looking around. The gait of someone who had walked this route before. She keyed her radio. Graves, I've got a civilian in the yard. West perimeter, moving south. Rail yards attract scrappers, probably nothing. She kept her scope on him. He stopped at a section of fence and crouched, checked something, then stood and continued south. She tracked him until he disappeared behind a cluster of covered hoppers. At 0128, a second figure appeared. This one came from the north end of the yard, entering through a maintenance gate that should have been padlocked. He wore reflective work gear, the kind used by actual rail maintenance crews. He walked directly to a switching panel on the main track and opened it. Spent 3 minutes doing something inside. Closed it. Walked back the way he came. Carter noted the time, noted the gate number, noted that the switching panel he had accessed controlled the primary track leading to the yard's eastern exit, the track that ran closest to the county road where the convoy would pass. She felt the first tightening in her chest, the small, instinctive signal that told her something was wrong before her brain had assembled the evidence. Second contact, she said. North gate, maintenance gear, accessed switching panel Sierra 3. Graves was quiet for a moment. What's Sierra 3 control? Eastern exit track. Another pause. Anyone else? Not yet, but there was. At 0141, a truck pulled into the yard through the south entrance. A heavy-duty pickup, no markings, moving slowly with its lights on low. It stopped near the maintenance sheds, and two men got out and began unloading equipment. Not scrap, not tools, cases. Aluminum cases of the kind used for electronics transport. Carter watched them carry the cases into the largest maintenance shed. She counted 4 cases, each one handled with the deliberate care of something heavy and fragile. She watched the two men make 3 trips each. The truck's cargo bed was empty when they finished. They did not speak to each other. They did not consult a list or check a manifest. They knew exactly how many cases there were and exactly where they were going. When the last case was inside the shed, one of the men pulled the shed's roll door down from the inside. A moment later, a thin line of light appeared beneath it. Not bright, a dim work lamp yellow, but steady. They were setting up. Carter noted the time, made a mark in her log, then tilted her scope slightly north and swept back along the western perimeter where the first man had walked. He had not reappeared. She thought about the sequence. 3 locations, accessed in a span of 47 minutes. A perimeter check. A switching panel accessed on the track closest to the convoy route. Electronics equipment moved into a maintenance shed. Each action performed by a different individual. Each individual moving independently, not communicating, not coordinating in any visible way, and yet the sequence had the unmistakable feel of choreography. You did not stumble into this kind of operational pattern. You rehearsed it. Graves, south entrance, unmarked truck, 2 individuals offloading equipment, electronics cases, moving into Shed Alpha. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that she checked her radio was transmitting. Graves, I'm here. His voice was careful now. How many total contacts? 3 locations, 4 individuals. Are they interacting? She watched. The maintenance worker was long gone. The man from the western perimeter had not reappeared. The 2 men at the shed were moving efficiently, carrying cases inside without speaking to each other. Negative, they're moving independently. Like they've been positioned, Graves said. It wasn't a question. Carter felt the tightening in her chest intensify. She had been in enough operations to know what coordinated pre-positioning looked like. It looked exactly like this. Multiple individuals, multiple access points, moving in sequence, but not in communication. Each performing a single task, each departing before the next one arrived, like pieces of something larger settling into place. What's the mission profile on this convoy? She asked. Classified, you know that. I know what I was told. I'm asking what you know. A long silence, then, keep watching, I'm going to make some calls. At 0158, her radio went to static. Not the gradual degradation of a weakening signal, not the intermittent breaking of a relay problem. This was clean and sudden. Full signal 1 second, flat white noise the next. She checked the frequency, checked the encryption setting, cycled the battery pack. Nothing changed. She gave it 90 seconds. The static remained. Then, just as suddenly, the signal returned. You read? Carter, do you? I'm here. Signal drop. Did you lose me? For 40 seconds. Graves' voice was controlled, but she heard the edge in it. What's your status? No change on my end. Contacts are still in position. That wasn't equipment failure, Graves said. Someone just ran a diagnostic sweep on the frequency band, testing the range. She absorbed that. A diagnostic sweep of a military encrypted frequency was not something you did with consumer equipment. It required hardware that was either military issue or high-end private sector, and it required someone with enough technical knowledge to know what frequency to target. They know I'm here, she said. They know someone's here. They don't have your position yet. That sweep was too broad. They were testing the whole band, not triangulating. But they will. Eventually. A pause. Carter, I want you to listen to me carefully. Do not move from your current position. Do not initiate contact with any of the individuals in that yard. You are overwatch for the convoy. That is all. Something is wrong with this mission. I know. I'm working on it. Just stay in position. She stayed. She watched the yard. The two men in the maintenance shed did not come back out. The western perimeter remained clear. No new contacts appeared. The static hit again at 0211. Lasted 30 seconds. Then cleared. Then hit again at 0224. Lasted 45 seconds. A pattern was forming. Not random equipment interference. Deliberate spaced sweeps. Someone was methodically working through the frequency band the way a lockpick works through the pins of a tumbler. Systematic, patient, professional. Graves, she said when the signal returned. These sweeps are getting longer. I know, he's narrowing the range. He, Carter noted the pronoun. You know what this is. I know what it looks like. Another pause. It looks like someone with military SIGINT training running a slow scan frequency analysis, which means whoever is in that yard, Carter, they are not scrap collectors. She pressed her back against the wall of the signal cab and thought about the freight cars below her. 200 yards of steel corridors, 100 places to hide, 100 angles she couldn't cover from this position. She thought about what Graves had said. Rail yards are sniper hell. Metal bounces sound. Metal bounces light. She raised her scope and began a slow, methodical scan. She found him at 0247. A man crouched at the base of a rail switch approximately 90 yards south-southwest of the signal tower. He was moving with the careful deliberation of someone trying not to be seen. Low to the ground, using the shadow of a boxcar to cover his approach to the switch housing. Carter tracked him through her scope. He reached the switch housing and opened the access panel. His movements were practiced. This was not someone figuring out the mechanism for the first time. He reached inside and began placing something. She keyed her radio. Contact, south-southwest, rail switch Tango 7. Individual is placing an unknown device in the switch housing. Graves came back fast. Can you identify the device? Negative, too much shadow. Threat assessment? Could be explosive, could be electronic, can't confirm. A pause. Hold position, do not engage. She held her crosshairs on the man's center mass. He was finishing now, closing the access panel, smoothing it shut with his palm. He straightened slightly to check his work. She began a slow trigger pull. Not a decision, a readiness. She was not going to fire without authorization, but she was going to be ready if authorization came. The man's head snapped forward. He dropped. Carter's finger stopped moving. She had not fired. She knew the feel of her own trigger. She had not broken the shot. The man lay still at the base of the switch housing, a dark stain spreading slowly on the pale gravel beneath his head. Headshot. Clean. Instant. Graves, she said. Her voice was flat, military calm. Contact is down. I did not fire. Silence. I did not fire, she said again. I heard you. Graves' voice was very still. Can you determine the shot's origin? She scanned, swept the yard in a wide arc. Nothing. No movement. No thermal signature that didn't belong to a warm steel surface. No muzzle flash. No displaced debris that might indicate a suppressed shot. Nothing, she said. No visible origin. Suppressed, long range, and aimed at a target that was moving, Graves said. That's a trained shooter, Carter. Not a security guard, not a contractor grunt. She kept scanning. Her scope moved across the freight cars, the crane towers, the maintenance sheds. Every shadow was a potential position. Every gap between cars was a potential corridor. There's a sniper in the yard, she said. Yes, Graves said, and they just killed someone you were watching, which means they were watching you. The shot hit the signal tower at 0249. Not her, the structure itself. The round punched through the steel panel on the cab's east wall, 6 inches to the right of her shoulder, and rang off the interior wall with a sound like a struck bell. Carter was on the floor of the cab before the echo faded, rolling left, putting the north wall between herself and the angle the shot had come from. She lay flat and ran the geometry in her head. Entry hole on the east wall. Exit mark on the west panel. She could see it from the floor, a slight dimpling in the steel. The round had traveled west to east across the cab. The origin was somewhere to the east of her position, which meant the shooter had repositioned since the kill shot. The kill shot had come from the south. She was certain of that, or nearly certain. The angle of the dead man's fall, the spread of the blood pool, the slight forward motion of the body at impact. Southern origin, medium to long range. This new shot had come from the east. He had moved in less than 2 minutes, changed position by roughly 90 degrees. She stayed flat and keyed her radio. Shot fired at my position, no injury, origin east. Graves said, "That was a probe." A probe. He wasn't trying to kill you, he was trying to see how fast you moved and which direction you'd go. He wanted to watch your reaction. She thought about that, thought about what it meant to fire a shot, not to hit, but to observe. It was a technique she knew. She had read about it in training, had it described to her by Graves himself years ago, in the context of studying enemy sniper doctrine. The probe shot tells you more than a kill shot, he had said. A kill shot gives you one piece of information. A probe gives you a map. He's building a picture of me, she said. Yes. What do I do? Move, but not the way he expects. He's watching for panic movement, fast, direction of perceived safety. Don't give him that. Move slow, move lateral. Make him work for the read. She began moving. She came down the ladder in complete darkness, moving by feel, 3 points of contact at all times, no noise. At the base of the tower, she crouched and waited 30 seconds, listening. The wind through the freight cars, the faint creak of cooling steel. Nothing that didn't belong. She moved east along the base of the tower, then turned south into a corridor between 2 rows of boxcars. The corridor was narrow, 8 feet wide, the cars towering above her on both sides, cutting her sight lines to almost nothing. She moved along it for 40 feet, then stopped at an intersection where a cross corridor opened left and right. She pressed against the boxcar wall and studied the angles. To the east, somewhere, he was watching, or had been watching. She had moved twice since the probe shot, once off the floor of the cab, once down the ladder, and each movement had been potentially visible from multiple angles. She had no way of knowing what he had seen. She needed to think about this differently. He had killed the man at the switch housing, clean shot, suppressed, from a position to the south. Then he had repositioned to the east and fired a probe shot at her. Then, presumably, he had repositioned again, because standing still after a probe shot was amateur behavior, and nothing about this shooter suggested amateur. So, where was he now? She thought about the yard's geometry. She thought about Graves' warning, too many reflections, and the implication underneath it. In a standard urban environment, a skilled sniper could establish 2 or 3 viable positions from a given starting point and rotate between them. In this yard, with the density of the freight cars and the height of the crane towers, the number of viable positions was vastly larger. He could be anywhere. She keyed her radio. Graves, I'm mobile, moving through the South Freight Cluster. Good, keep moving. Don't let him settle. I need a threat assessment on the dead man at Tango 7. A long pause, longer than she expected. When Graves spoke, his voice had changed. There was something underneath the careful flatness. She couldn't name it precisely, not quite concern, something older. Carter, he said, I need you to look at the dead man again. Can you do that without exposing yourself? She checked her position. The body was 70 yards east and north of her current location. Getting eyes on it without breaking cover was possible. There was a gap between two flat cars that gave a partial sightline to the switch housing. She moved to the gap and looked. The man lay exactly as he had fallen, face down, one arm extended, the other tucked beneath him. The dark stain on the gravel had spread further, maybe 2 feet across now, nearly black in the ambient light. She studied his posture, the way he'd fallen, forward and slightly left, which meant the bullet had traveled from slightly right of his center line. She revised her estimate of the shot's origin, not due south, south-southeast, which put the shooter somewhere in the crane cluster, or in the elevated maintenance gantry on the yard's southeastern boundary. High ground. The shooter had wanted elevation, not for the shot itself, which could have been made from ground level, but for the angle after. To watch the yard from above, to watch her. "I have eyes on." "His coat," Graves said. "What color?" She looked. "Dark blue, heavy canvas." Graves was quiet for a moment. "There's a problem," he said at last. "Tell me." "Dark blue canvas coat is standard issue for Defense Intelligence Agency field couriers. I'm looking at the manifest right now. There was a DIA courier assigned to a liaison mission in this county tonight. His last check-in was at 2200 hours. A pause. He was supposed to meet someone at the Harmon terminal. Carter stared at the body. "He was one of ours," she said. "Yes." The wind moved through the freight cars. Steel sang in the darkness. "Graves," she said slowly. "Who killed him?" But even as she asked, she already knew the answer wasn't simple. Because the man at the switch housing hadn't been placing an explosive or a tracking device. He had been hiding something. Something small, in a housing that no one was supposed to open, in a yard that was supposed to be empty, and someone had killed him to prevent the delivery. "That's the wrong question," Graves said. His voice was very quiet now. "The right question is, what was he carrying?" She looked at the body one more time. Then she began moving toward it. She moved in short bursts. 10 yards, stop, listen, scan. 15 yards, stop. The corridor between the boxcars gave her cover on both sides, and she stayed close to the left wall, her right side open to allow a fast pivot if she needed to swing her rifle. 50 yards out from the body, she stopped. She had heard something, not from ahead, from the south. A faint, rhythmic metal sound. Not the wind-driven creak of the freight cars. Something with intention behind it. A footstep on a metal surface, maybe, or something being dragged across steel. She waited. The sound did not repeat. She keyed her radio. "Graves, I'm close to the courier. Something's moving in the yard, south sector." "Be careful," was all he said. She moved the last 50 yards in a prone crawl, keeping below the level of the switch housing, using the shadow of the boxcar row to cover her approach. When she reached the courier, she confirmed what she already knew. He was gone. The life, the warmth, the presence that made a body a person. What remained was logistics. A dead man in a dark coat, one hand still partially extended toward a work he had not finished. She checked his pockets quickly. A secondary phone, smashed. Someone had stepped on it deliberately, not accidentally. A folded piece of paper, dense with printed text she couldn't read in the darkness, without a light she wasn't going to use. A key on a plain steel ring, no markings. She pocketed the paper and the key. Then she heard the second sound, closer this time. From behind a tanker car 20 yards to her south. Not a footstep, something more deliberate. The sound of something being placed, carefully, quietly. Someone else was in this yard, and they were very, very close. She did not move toward the sound. That was the instinct. Close distance, identify the threat, resolve the uncertainty. Instinct was wrong here. Instinct was what he was counting on. She backed away from the courier's body instead, moving north along the base of the switch housing, putting steel between herself and the tanker car to the south. Slow movement, controlled breathing. She counted her steps and built the geometry in her head. The tanker car was 20 yards south. Whatever had made the sound was near its base. Ground level, not elevated. Which meant whoever was there either didn't know her position or had already determined she was low. She stopped at the boxcar row and pressed her back against the cold steel. She had a notebook in her left cargo pocket, a small one, 4 inches by 6, with a mechanical pencil clipped to the spine. Graves had given it to her before her second deployment with a single instruction: draw everything you can't remember. She had used it on every deployment since, and the habit had saved her more than once. She pulled it out now and began to draw. The yard from memory, main switching tracks north-south, freight car clusters labeled by type, maintenance sheds, cranes, signal tower. She marked every contact position, then began identifying dead zones, areas so hemmed in by steel they functioned as blind spots in the tactical picture. She found 7. Then she marked the thermal distortion zones, 3 large areas where steel density and residual heat created enough infrared noise to defeat her FLIR scope. She looked at the completed drawing. Graves, she said quietly. Still here. 7 dead zones, 3 major thermal distortion areas, at least 40 viable sniper positions I cannot observe simultaneously from any single point. A pause. That's why whoever sent us here chose it, he said. That's not a freight yard, Carter. That's a kill box. She had already been thinking exactly that. A kill box, a defined area in which a target could be contained and eliminated with minimal risk to the operator. The freight cars created natural walls. The dead zones created natural ambush points. The thermal distortion made surveillance nearly impossible. Anyone who entered this yard looking for a threat would spend most of their energy managing their own exposure rather than finding the shooter. Someone designed this, she said, or recognized it and set the meeting here on purpose. The courier was meeting someone. Yes. And someone killed him before the meeting happened. Yes. She looked at her drawing, looked at the X she had placed on Tango 7, then looked at the maze of corridors and clusters surrounding it. Graves, the man who made the sound near the tanker car, if he's moving through the south sector, which dead zones does that route pass through? She heard him working through it mentally. She could almost hear the geometry moving in his head, the same way she had learned it from him. Dead zones 4, 5, and 6, he said finally. That route runs along the interior of the main boxcar block, passes beneath the elevated gantry at the south boundary, and exits near the base of the number 2 crane. She looked at her drawing. Dead zone 4 was 30 yards southwest of her current position. She began moving toward it. She reached dead zone 4 at 0318. It was a gap between a row of covered hoppers and a long string of coupled boxcars, a corridor perhaps 6 feet wide and 60 feet long, running east-west, invisible from above and from either end until you were inside it. The gravel here was undisturbed, no footprints, no signs of recent movement. She moved through it slowly, checking both ends, then turned south and entered Dead Zone 5. Dead Zone 5 was different. It was the space beneath a section of elevated flat car frames, a low-clearance crawl space defined by the steel undercarriages of 3 flat cars that had been stored on a raised section of track. The clearance was roughly 3 feet. She went flat and moved through it on her elbows, rifle cradled in the crooks of her arms. Halfway through, she stopped. The gravel here was disturbed. Not heavily, just the faint impression of a knee, and beside it the slightly deeper indentation of a boot toe. Someone had crouched here. Recently, the impressions were sharp-edged, not yet blurred by wind. She studied them. The knee print was large, a man's knee probably. The boot print showed a heel worn slightly on the outer edge. She filed that detail away without knowing yet whether it mattered. She emerged from Dead Zone 5 on the south side and pressed against a tanker car, scanning. Nothing moved. She keyed her radio. Signs of recent occupancy in Dead Zone 5, single individual, boot print, Large. Copy. She waited, counted to 60, listened. The wind through the freight cars, the slow creak of cooling metal, the distant sound, very faint, barely audible, of vehicle traffic on the county road to the east. The convoy was still 40 minutes out. She moved south along the tanker car's flank, toward the corner where it ended, and the open ground of the south switching yard began. At the corner, she stopped and looked around the edge. The fuel drum sat 30 feet out, in the open ground between the tanker cluster and the base of the number 2 crane. It was a standard 55-gallon industrial drum, painted yellow, the kind used to store hydraulic fluid or diesel additive. It was standing upright, and she had noted it from the signal tower during her initial survey. A bullet hit it. The sound was a sharp metallic crack, not the boom of an impact explosion, just steel punching through steel, and the drum lurched sideways on its base. A thin stream of liquid began running from the entry hole, darkening the gravel. She had already moved. Before the sound fully registered, she was back around the corner, flat against the tanker car's flank, making herself as small as possible. She ran the geometry. The drum was 30 feet south of her position. The bullet had come from the east. The entry hole had faced west, which meant the round had traveled west to east. She had not heard a muzzle report. Suppressed. The angle suggested an elevated position on the eastern boundary, possibly the maintenance gantry, possibly the upper framework of the number 3 crane. She thought about what Graves had told her after the probe shot at the signal tower. A probe gives you a map. The shot at the drum had not been aimed at her. She had been behind cover when it hit. He could not have seen her, which meant he hadn't been shooting at her. He had been shooting at the drum to watch her move. She had moved exactly as a trained operator would, fast, to cover, away from the sound. He had seen that movement. He had just confirmed that she was a professional, that she was operating solo, and that she was currently in the tanker cluster. "He's tracking me," she said into the radio. "I know. He just told himself where you are." "So where does that leave me?" Graves was quiet for a beat. "It leaves you exactly where he wants you, reactive, playing his game in his yard." She thought about that. She thought about the notebook drawing in her pocket, the dead zones, the thermal distortion areas, the 40 viable sniper positions. "I need to stop reacting," she said. "Yes. I need to give him something predictable, something he'll expect, and then not be there." "Now you're thinking," Graves said. "What's predictable for a solo operator pinned in a tanker cluster?" She already knew the answer. She tries to relocate to higher ground. She tries to get back to an elevated position for better sightlines. And the elevated positions in that yard are the signal tower, the crane frameworks, the maintenance gantry, all of which he can observe. "So I don't go up," she said. "I go down." She pulled out the notebook and found the maintenance tunnel markings she had noted during the initial survey. 3 tunnels, running beneath the main switching tracks, used originally for cable routing and drainage access. Their locations were marked on the yard's original survey map she had studied during her prep. Tunnel 1 ran beneath Track 7, Northeast Sector. Tunnel 2 ran beneath Track 14, Central Yard. Tunnel 3 ran beneath Track 21, South Sector, which put its southern entrance approximately 40 yards east of her current position. She looked at the drawing. Tunnel 3's northern exit came up inside the main boxcar block, Dead Zone 2. From there, she could move through the boxcar block without any line of sight exposure to the eastern boundary where the shooter appeared to be operating. "I'm going underground," she said. She found the tunnel entrance at 0341, a concrete hatch set flush with the ground, painted the same color as the surrounding gravel. Easy to miss unless you were looking. A heavy padlock secured it. She checked the lock. Standard commercial, the kind that deteriorated badly in outdoor conditions. The shackle had surface rust, but the mechanism still looked functional. She didn't have bolt cutters. She examined the hinge side instead. The concrete around the left hinge had cracked over years of freeze-thaw cycles. She worked her knife blade into the crack and leveraged carefully. The hinge plate lifted. The hatch pulled free from the left side far enough to create a gap she could fit through. She lowered herself into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, shoulder-width, concrete walls, a floor of compacted earth and gravel. A trickle of water ran along the center. The smell was cold and mineral, like a basement that had never been dried out. She moved through it on hands and knees, her rifle slung across her back. 40 yards, she counted them. Her earpiece crackled, Graves' voice slightly distorted by the concrete around her, but audible. "I've been working the courier's identity," Graves said. "And?" His name was Harwick, Thomas Harwick, DIA Field Liaison, 11 years, clean record. He filed a travel advisory 3 days ago. Coded location, standard protocol. "I can't access the underlying details. Clearance level above me." A pause. "But I pulled his last GPS ping. He was at Harmon Terminal at 0231 hours. He came through the south entrance, the same one the truck used." "He wasn't just a courier," she said. "No, I think he came to inspect whatever was being set up in that shed. He knew about it. He was part of it." A pause. "And someone killed him anyway." She crouched in the tunnel darkness. "Graves, my mission orders. Who issued them?" "That's the other thing." Keystrokes. "They came through Major Harold's office, through his access codes. But Harold has been on personal leave for 6 days. Someone used his credentials, Carter. Someone with access to them. Which is a very short list." She sat with that. "Someone set this mission up," she said, "and sent me into it blind. I don't know their exact intent yet, but I'm going to find out." His voice hardened. "Keep moving. Don't let him pin you." She moved through the boxcar block for 12 minutes before she found it. The boxcar was coupled to a string of 5 others on track 19, unremarkable from the outside. The same faded red paint and rusted hardware as the cars on either side. Its door was sealed with a padlock that was not rusted. Not new, but maintained. Someone had oiled it recently. She stood in the gap between track 19 and 20 and looked at it. The thermal scope showed a faint warmth bleeding through the door seal. Not significant, not the heat of a human body. The kind of warmth produced by electronics running on low power in an enclosed space. She looked up and down the track. Nothing moved. She worked the padlock. It was a high-security model, not going to yield to her knife. But the door latch mechanism beside it was a standard rail freight latch. And standard rail freight latches had a secondary release designed for emergency access. She found the release lever beneath the latch housing and pulled it. The door slid open 2 inches before catching on the padlock chain. 2 inches was enough. She put her eye to the gap. Inside, darkness, and within the darkness, the faint blue pulse of indicator lights on rack-mounted equipment. She could see 4 server-sized units, their fronts dense with cables and ports. A satellite uplink transceiver sat on a folding table. She recognized the form factor from her intelligence training. A military-grade unit, encrypted, the kind used for secure data relay over commercial satellite infrastructure. Its status light was steady green. Beside the transceiver, a laptop computer, open, its screen dim but active. Too far inside the car for her to read the display. She looked at the cables, traced them with her eye. They ran along the car's interior wall and disappeared through a sealed port in the floor. Down, presumably through a conduit, presumably connected to something beneath the yard. She pulled back from the gap and stood against the car's exterior. "Graves, track 19, boxcar 6 from the south end. Active electronics set up inside. Satellite uplink. Multiple server units. Hardwired to a floor conduit." A long pause. "That's not DIA equipment." "What is it?" "The uplink form factor you described, that's a Strident-class relay unit. Military spec, but the Strident series was decommissioned by DoD in 2019. The hardware was sold through a disposal contractor. Keystrokes. Carter, that equipment ended up in private hands. Defense contractors mostly, some intelligence consulting firms. Someone's running a private signal station in a decommissioned rail yard, she said, using military surplus hardware. On the night of a classified military convoy. He paused. This is not a coincidence. What is this yard really being used for? I don't know yet, but that uplink is active right now, which means data is moving. Someone is transmitting or receiving through that relay, and they've been doing it long enough to set up a permanent installation in a freight car. A pause. That takes time. That takes resources. And it takes someone who knew this yard would stay empty. She looked back at the gap in the door. The blue indicator lights pulsed steadily in the darkness. Patient. Indifferent. The convoy, she said. Yes. It's not carrying what the orders say it's carrying. Almost certainly not. His voice was flat and tired. Carter, I need you to get eyes on that satellite uplink's transmit log if you can. I need to know what frequency it's using and what the last active timestamp is. She looked at the 2-inch gap in the distance to the laptop inside. I can't get in without cutting the chain. Then don't get in. Stay mobile. Mark the location and keep moving. A pause. And Carter, do not touch that equipment. If it's alarmed and you trigger it, I know. She marked the boxcar in her notebook. Track 19, car 6. Then she slid the door back flush and moved east through the block. At 0402, the yard changed. She heard it first, a deep mechanical groan from the south, the sound of a rail switch actuating under load. In the still night air of the yard, it was startlingly loud. Then 50 seconds later, a second switch, this one to the north, near the entrance cluster. She stopped moving and listened. A freight car door banged open somewhere in the southern cluster. Then, a minute later, another door. This one closer, the sound sharp and distinct. Not wind. The doors here were heavy steel on roller tracks. Wind didn't open them. Then the metal ringing started. A slow, rhythmic sound, like something being dragged along a steel surface. First from the east, then, after a pause, from somewhere to the northwest. Different distances, different cadences. Each sound appearing, lasting 5 or 10 seconds, then stopping. She crouched against a boxcar and thought about what she was hearing. He was playing the yard like a keyboard. He knew the acoustic properties of this space. He knew that metal surfaces reflected and distorted sound, that a noise made in the south would seem to come from the west, that the maintenance tunnels created acoustic conduits that moved sound unpredictably. He was using that knowledge to generate a pattern of sounds that had no consistent origin. Every noise was designed to make her look somewhere. She kept her eyes still and her position stationary. She thought about what moving toward any of these sounds would accomplish. Nothing tactical. It would accomplish exactly what he wanted. It would generate movement he could observe. Keep her reacting. Keep her chasing sounds that led nowhere. She keyed her radio. He's running acoustic deception. Multiple sound sources, no consistent origin, trying to flush movement. How long has it been running? 6 minutes. He's impatient, Graves said. He expected you to move by now. Or he's repositioning under cover of the noise. A pause. That too. She thought about that. The acoustic display was a dual-purpose operation. It could flush her movement, yes, but it could also mask his own. While she was processing the sounds from multiple directions, he was moving. And if he was moving toward something. Toward the boxcar on track 19. She began moving back toward it. The sounds continued. Freight doors, switch actuations, the rhythmic metal dragging. She moved against them, using them, letting their noise cover her own footsteps. It was a technique she had read about and never had occasion to use. She was using his cover against him. She reached track 19 in 4 minutes. The boxcar was undisturbed, padlock intact, door flush. She moved past it and took up position behind the adjacent car, a flat car with a steel frame load carrier that gave her a low-profile hide with a partial sightline to both ends of track 19. And she waited. The sounds in the yard continued for another 3 minutes, then stopped. Complete stillness. She watched track 19. Nothing moved. After 10 minutes, she began to question herself. Maybe he hadn't been going to the boxcar. Maybe the acoustic display was purely about flushing her. Maybe she had overread the situation. Then, at the far north end of track 19, a shadow shifted. It was barely a movement. The darkness at the end of the track was dense and featureless, but something in it had changed. A shape had moved from one position to another. Not a freight car, not wind-driven debris, something upright, something that had been standing still long enough to blend into the background and had then made a small, careful movement. She raised her scope. The thermal display showed a faint, warm signature. Very faint, heavily muted, which meant insulated clothing designed to reduce thermal signature. But present, human-shaped, standing at the far end of track 19, approximately 80 yards out, looking at the boxcar. He stood there for 40 seconds. Didn't move toward the car, didn't move away, just observed it. Then the signature vanished. Not gradually, it cut off as cleanly as a light switch. He had moved behind something with enough mass to completely block his thermal output. A solid steel freight car, probably. One of the tankers. I had him, she said quietly. Track 19, north end, 80 yards. Thermal signature, insulated suit. He was watching the boxcar. Graves was quiet for a moment. He knows about the equipment. He came to check on it, make sure it hadn't been tampered with. She thought about that. He's protecting it, or monitoring it, making sure it stays operational. A pause. Carter, that changes the picture. Tell me, if he's protecting the signal station, then he's not an independent actor. He's an asset for whoever is running that operation, which means he didn't kill Harwick to stop the operation. He killed Harwick because Harwick was a threat to it. She absorbed that. And I'm a threat to it. You're an unknown. He doesn't know yet whether you're another threat or an asset his people sent in. A pause. That's why he hasn't killed you. He's trying to figure out which one you are. She relocated twice in the next 20 minutes, moving in slow, deliberate arcs through the boxcar block. She was looking for his position without trying to look like she was looking. Ambiguous movement, no direct approach vectors, nothing that would read as tactical pursuit. At 0431, she found the shooting position he had used for the drone shot at the signal tower. It was on top of a covered hopper, accessed by a steel ladder on the hopper's end. The top of the hopper was flat and broad, a natural prone position, and its elevation, about 14 feet, gave a clear sight line to the signal tower 200 yards to the north. She examined the surface carefully in the darkness. The slight displacement of grit and rust dust on the hopper's roof. The faint indentation where a bipod had rested. He had lain here, made his shots from here. She examined the position methodically, looking for the details that were relevant and the details that told her something about him. She found them. The bipod marks were precisely spaced. A standard military bipod, nothing unusual. But the body impression in the rust dust told her something. She measured it with her handspan. He was large. She estimated 6 feet or above, broad through the shoulders. The position of the hip impression relative to the bipod told her his dominant eye. Right. And then she found the casings. 2 of them placed neatly at the hopper's right edge. Not ejected, placed. Deliberately set down rather than allowed to roll or scatter. Graves had mentioned this kind of thing once. In a long lecture about reading a sniper's psychology from his position, the way a man treats his casings tells you something about how his mind works, he had said. A careless shooter leaves them where they fall. A paranoid one takes them with him. A methodical one stacks them. These were placed. Parallel. Neat. Not paranoid. Not careless. Methodical. Organized. A man who imposed order on his environment even when the environment was a rusty freight car in the dark. She photographed them with a small camera on her secondary device. Then she looked south, toward where he had been standing when she saw his thermal signature. He was standing there now. Not the signature, the man himself. A silhouette, 60 yards out, between two tanker cars, looking directly at her position atop the hopper. He was visible for 3 seconds. She did not raise her rifle. In 3 seconds, at 60 yards, in low light, she could have made the shot, but she did not take it. Something in the posture of the silhouette stopped her. He was not aimed at her. He was simply standing, watching. Then a section of maintenance catwalk above and behind her, a rusted walkway connecting the hopper to an adjacent storage frame, groaned and shifted, pulled by some stress that had been building in its corroded bolts for years. A section of the railing broke free and fell, clanging off the hopper's side, and the whole structure shuddered. She grabbed the hopper's edge and swung off the ladder side, dropping to the ground, rolling clear of the falling railing section. When she looked up, the silhouette was gone. She lay on the gravel in the sudden stillness and breathed. He had seen her. He had let her see him, and then he had disappeared. She thought about the two parallel casings, the methodical mind that placed them just so. She thought about the probe shot at the signal tower, the drum shot to flush her movement, the acoustic display that had moved her but not broken her. Every action had been designed to control and observe, not to kill. And just now, 60 yards, clear sightline, she had been occupied with the falling catwalk and would not have reacted in time. He had not fired. She was back in the maintenance tunnel at 0447, moving east through Tunnel 2, when Graves called. "I have the files," he said. The register she had heard only twice before, the one that preceded significant events. The Harmon terminal has been operating as a covert intelligence exchange site for 14 months. 3 parties, a DoD intelligence faction, a private consultancy in the Caymans, and a foreign commercial entity that's almost certainly a state intelligence front. The signal station in that boxcar is the node. Routing names, addresses, operational histories between all 3 for over a year. A pause. One of the DoD officials involved is in the chain of command that issued your mission orders. She thought about the convoy. Still coming, 22 minutes. What's it carrying? Physical documents, classified files, the kind that don't exist digitally. Moving to the yard tonight for transfer to the foreign party. His voice was flat. Harwick knew about the operation and had stopped cooperating. He filed an internal complaint 3 weeks ago through a channel he thought was secure. It wasn't. He came tonight to pull evidence from the relay station. Hard copy extract, the laptop you saw. And someone sent a shooter to stop him before he got there. Someone who already had a shooter in the yard. Long-term, someone who knows every inch of it. A pause. Carter, whatever you decide tonight, you're doing it without institutional cover. The official version will be whatever serves the people who sent you there. She thought about the chain of command, about the mission orders from a man who had been on leave for 6 days. "Tell me about the civilians," she said. "What civilians?" "I observed a group of scrap collectors entering the south perimeter around 0130. 3 individuals. They moved into the southern freight cluster, and I haven't seen them since." She paused. "If whatever is happening in this yard tonight escalates, they're in the blast radius." Graves was quiet for a moment. "I'll try to get an external warning to the county. Anonymous tip, potential hazmat incident at the terminal. Might get local emergency services to the perimeter." Another pause. "Might not be fast enough." "I know." She began moving again, east through the tunnel, toward the yard's eastern boundary and the county road beyond. The convoy was 19 minutes out. She found them at 04:59. Three people, sheltering in the interior of an empty covered hopper car on track 27, the southernmost track in the yard, as far from the active areas as you could get and still be inside the fence. Two men and a woman, older, with the worn equipment of habitual scrappers, bolt cutters, burlap sacks, magnetic wands for ferrous detection. They had made themselves a camp of sorts, a small battery lantern on its lowest setting, insulating pads on the hopper's floor, a thermos of something warm. She came to their car from the east end, moving quietly, and knocked twice on the steel wall before showing herself. Civilians in active areas made unpredictable decisions. She did not want them to run. The woman appeared at the hopper door. 50 maybe, hard face, practical eyes. She looked at Carter, at the rifle, the tactical kit, the seriousness of her posture, and did not move. "There is going to be a serious incident in this yard within the next 30 minutes, Carter said, keeping her voice low and flat. "You need to leave through the south fence and keep moving south until you reach the county highway. Do not stop. Do not call anyone from the yard. Get out and get to the highway." The woman looked at her steadily. "We're not doing anything illegal." "I know. I'm not here about that. I'm here because people are going to get hurt in this yard tonight, and you are in the middle of it." She held the woman's gaze. "Please." A long moment. The woman looked back at the two men inside the hopper. Something passed between them, a look that carried the weight of years of shared decision-making. "South fence," the woman said. "Yes, the southeast corner has a cut section. Move through it and go south. Stay low until you clear the yard." The woman nodded once. Carter moved back into the shadows and waited. She watched them leave. They moved well, quietly, without the panic that made civilians dangerous. The woman led, the two men followed, all three staying close to the freight car lines, using the steel as cover the way she had taught herself to do. She watched until they cleared the south boundary fence. Then she allowed herself a single breath of something that wasn't quite relief. The three civilians were out. The yard now contained two snipers, an active intelligence relay, a dead courier, and a classified military convoy 19, now 17, minutes from the perimeter. And somewhere to the north, the two men from the maintenance shed were still in Shed Alpha, running whatever equipment was in those aluminum cases. She had not cleared them. She thought about the rules of engagement on a mission that had never had rules of engagement. She thought about what Graves had said. "Whatever you decide to do in that yard tonight, you're doing it without institutional cover." She was beginning to understand what that meant, not in the abstract, in the operational sense. In the sense of, there is no cavalry, there is no escalation protocol, there is no oversight body that is going to arrive and make the right call. There is only the yard and what happens in it, and whether you can live with what you did or didn't do when it was over. She began moving north, toward Shed Alpha. She was 40 yards from Shed Alpha when her radio receiver, not the primary comms unit, but the secondary scanner she carried for frequency monitoring, emitted a single pulse. She stopped, pulled the scanner from her chest pocket. The scanner was showing a signal on a frequency she did not recognize. Not a standard military band, not a civilian commercial band. A narrow, encrypted burst channel, the kind used for short-range, covert communication between assets who wanted their transmissions to be difficult to intercept and impossible to attribute. The signal was broadcasting a single audio file. She put her earpiece in and played it. 3 seconds of audio. Flat, low, utterly calm. A single word spoken with the careful enunciation of a man choosing his words with complete precision. Leave. She stood in the darkness 40 yards from the maintenance shed and thought about that word. One word. No context, no threat, no instruction beyond the word itself. And the choice of channel, not her primary military frequency, not an open broadcast, but a targeted, narrow-band transmission aimed at her specific scanner frequency. He knew what equipment she carried. He had scanned her secondary systems as well as her primary comms. She pulled out her scanner and examined the transmission data. The burst had lasted zero point 0.4 seconds. Encrypted using a protocol she partially recognized, it was derived from a CIA field communications standard that had been in use in the early 2000s and had been updated twice since. The version she was looking at was the original, unupdated form. Graves would know what that meant. She keyed her primary radio. "Graves, he just transmitted to my scanner, single word. The encryption protocol is CIA field comms, original vintage, pre-2008. A pause. "You're sure? Original vintage?" "Positive." Another pause, longer. "Carter, pre-2008 CIA field comms encryption was used by a specific unit, Domestic Operations Division, Counterintelligence Branch. They were responsible for monitoring foreign intelligence penetration of U.S. defense contractors." A pause. "That unit was disbanded in 2011 following a congressional investigation into overreach. Most of its assets were reassigned or let go. Some of them went private." She stood with that. "He's former CIA counterintel," she said. "That's my read, which means he knows what that signal station is doing. He was probably tracking it before tonight." She looked at the shed. "He killed Harwick because Harwick was part of the operation, not because he was trying to stop it. And then he told you to leave," Graves said slowly, "because you are not part of the operation. You're a complication, an unknown asset in his operational space." A pause. "He doesn't want to kill you, Carter, but he will if he has to." She thought about the silhouette on track 19, the 60-yard sightline, the choice not to shoot. "He's trying to resolve this without more casualties," she said. "Yes, which tells us something about who he is and what he thinks this operation is for." Graves' voice was careful. "He's not protecting the intelligence exchange. He's building a case against it. He needs the station intact and operational long enough to document what it's doing." A pause. "Harwick was going to extract the data early. If he had, whoever runs this operation would have shut it down and disappeared before the documentation was complete. So Ghostline killed the man who was going to stop the trap before it was sprung," she said. "Yes." She looked at the shed, thought about the convoy, now 14 minutes out. "He's using the yard as evidence," she said. "He needs the operation to run long enough to capture proof. The convoy is part of it." "Almost certainly. And my command sent me here to do what? Disrupt the evidence collection? Provide cover for the convoy's actual purpose? Or just complicate the picture enough that nobody can tell what happened afterward?" Graves did not answer that question, because there was no clean answer, and he was not a man who offered false comfort in place of accuracy. "What do I do?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. "You do what you think is right," he said finally. "Same as always." She did not go to Shed Alpha. She went back to her notebook instead, crouching in the gap between two boxcars at the edge of the central yard, and looked at her drawing. She had been operating on assumptions. The first assumption, she was on a legitimate mission. Gone. The second assumption, the shooter was hostile. Uncertain. The third assumption, the convoy was what she had been told. Almost certainly wrong. She needed to rebuild the picture from what she actually knew. She drew a new diagram in the notebook. Smaller, more conceptual. 3 circles. Circle 1, the intelligence exchange operation. Running out of the boxcar signal station, involving DoD insiders, a private consultancy, and a foreign front entity. 14 months old. Active tonight. Circle 2, Ghostline. Former CIA counterintel, working privately. Positioned in this yard with knowledge of the exchange operation. Building a case. Using the yard's operational activity as evidence. Eliminating threats to that evidence, Harwick, while warning away complications, her. Circle 3, her chain of command. Someone using a superior's credentials to issue her mission orders, sending her to a yard where an active intelligence exchange operation was running and a covert counter-intel asset was already positioned. Why? She stared at the three circles. The answer was not comfortable. She was Circle 3's solution to Circle 2's problem. Ghostline was building a case that implicated DoD insiders. Those insiders needed the case disrupted. They needed either the signal station destroyed, which would end the evidence trail, or Ghostline eliminated. And they had sent a counter-sniper into the yard to do one or the other without any official record of the order. If she destroyed the signal station, no evidence, operation vanishes, insiders safe. If she killed Ghostline, no case builder, no documentation, insiders safe. If she died in the yard, collateral casualty of a hostile encounter, easily explained, insiders safe. 3 outcomes. All of them served the people who had sent her here. She sat with that for a full minute. Then she thought about the thing Graves had said to her years ago in a different context. The soldier who understands the chessboard is more dangerous than the soldier who doesn't. Because the one who doesn't understand, they can be played. The one who does, they make their own move. She looked at the 3 circles again. She drew a line between Circle 1 and Circle 2. Ghostline was positioned against the exchange operation. He needed it to keep running, just long enough to document it completely. She drew a line between Circle 2 and Circle 3. Her command needed the operation disrupted, or the counter-intel asset neutralized. Then she put her pen on the paper and drew a 4th circle. Smaller, outside the other 3. That circle was her. And she thought about what it meant to be the player that nobody had accounted for. She keyed her radio. Graves, how long does Ghostline need the station to keep running to complete his evidence package? A pause. I don't know. I'd need to know his operational parameters. Estimate, based on what you know about that kind of operation. If he's been building for 14 months and is this close to a major convoy event, he thought for a moment, he needs the convoy to arrive, be documented, and ideally be logged in the relay system. That's a matter of hours, not days. The convoy is 13 minutes out. Then he needs tonight to complete. And whoever sent me here needs tonight to not happen. Yes, she stood up and began moving. Not toward the shed, not toward the signal station, not toward the position she had been holding. Toward the eastern boundary of the yard, where the county road ran flat and pale in the pre-dawn dark. She needed to see the convoy. She reached the eastern fence at 0511. The county road was empty. She could see half a mile in each direction. Flat Midwest farmland, fallow fields under gray sky, the distant pale line of the road fading north and south. No headlights. Then, at the southern horizon, lights appeared. 6 vehicles. The lead was a military utility truck, no markings visible at distance. Behind it, 2 covered cargo trucks. Then a gap. Then 2 more utility vehicles. Then a black SUV at the rear, its windows dark. She watched them come. They were not moving at convoy speed. Convoy speed on an empty county road was typically 40 to 50 miles per hour. Efficient movement, minimal exposure time. These vehicles were doing maybe 25, slow and deliberate. She raised her scope and studied the lead truck as it came closer. The men in the cab were in civilian clothes, not military uniforms, not tactical gear. Civilian clothes, the kind you wore to blend in. The driver had a jacket. The passenger had a baseball cap. The markings on the truck's door panels had been obscured with magnetic overlays. She could see the slight sheen of the magnet's edges in the pre-dawn light. She shifted her scope to the cargo trucks. Their tarps were down and she couldn't see what they carried. But the trucks themselves, she studied the profile, the wheel arrangement, the suspension height. These were not military cargo trucks. They were commercial, heavy-duty trucks with military-patterned tarps strapped over the beds. She thought about what Graves had said. Someone moving through the county without a flight record. The vehicle slowed as they approached the yard's eastern entrance. She watched the gate. It was a heavy commercial gate, chain link with steel poles, padlocked. Or had been padlocked. She watched someone walk out from the maintenance shed area and cut the padlock with bolt cutters, swinging the gate open to receive the convoy. From the maintenance shed, the two men who had moved the electronics cases inside. They knew the convoy was coming. They had been waiting for it. She watched the first vehicle pull through the gate and into the yard. The SUV at the rear stopped at the gate rather than following the convoy in. Its engine idled. The windows stayed dark. Then the rear door opened and a man got out. She had him in her scope at 200 yards. She could see enough. He was dressed well, a long coat, good shoes, the posture of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. He stood beside the SUV and looked at the yard with the patient satisfaction of someone watching a project come to completion. He was not military. He was not a contractor. He was something that both those categories worked for when they were working for the wrong people. She watched him take out a phone, look at it, put it back in his pocket. Then she watched him take out a second phone, make a short call, and put that one away too. A minute later, from inside the maintenance shed, the faint blue-white light of the electronics equipment brightened slightly. She could see it leaking under the shed's roll door. The relay had just increased its transmission output. The convoy was here. The signal station was logging it, and the man in the long coat was watching from the gate like he owned everything inside the fence. She thought about the word complicit, about what it meant when the people who gave your orders were the people you were supposed to be protecting the country from. She keyed her radio. Graves, the convoy is inside. Civilian vehicles, commercial trucks under military tarps. Orchestrated by the men who set up the shed equipment. There is a principal on site, well-dressed, rear of the convoy. This is not a military logistics operation. A long pause. I know, Graves said. He sounded tired. Carter, what I'm about to tell you... He stopped, started again. The convoy manifest. I got to it 20 minutes ago. The covered cargo trucks are carrying hard copy intelligence files, physical documents, the kind that don't exist in any digital system. They are being transported to this yard for transfer to the foreign commercial entity I mentioned. The entity's representative is the man you're looking at. She stared at the man in the long coat. This is an intelligence transfer, she said. Yes, physical documents, classified, the kind that has names in them. His voice was very flat. Carter, if those files leave this yard tonight, people will be killed. Not hypothetically, specifically. There are names in those files. She thought about Ghostline, about his need for the operation to run long enough to document. The relay station was documenting it right now, but the files were about to move. And once they moved, the documentation became irrelevant for the people whose names were in them. I need to make a decision, she said. I know. And I need to make it now. I know that too. She had two choices. She knew it clearly. The situation had collapsed to its essential geometry, the way situations did when there was no more time for complexity. Choice 1, let the operation complete. Let Ghostline document everything. Let the evidence package finalize. The files leave with the foreign representative. The people whose names are in them are burned, and at some undefined future point, a legal case is built that might or might not result in consequences for the people responsible. Justice deferred, lives endangered or ended in the interim. Choice 2, destroy the signal station. The relay goes dark. The documentation is lost. Ghostline's 14 months of work is wasted. The legal case dies with the evidence. But the convoy is exposed. She is a witness. Graves is a witness. And the man in the long coat loses his clean exit. The insiders lose their cover. The operation ends tonight, here, with no evidence package and no quiet resolution. Just noise and exposure and whatever consequences flow from both. Neither choice was good. She thought about a third option. She thought about Ghostline. He was in this yard. He had been building this case for 14 months. He needed the relay to keep running long enough to log the convoy documents into the system. That logging, if it was complete, would create a record that existed in the relay's cache even after the files physically left the yard. She checked the time. 5:19. The convoy had been inside the yard for 8 minutes. The cargo trucks had pulled up to Shed Alpha. She could hear, very faintly at this distance, the sound of the shed's roll door going up. They were unloading. If Ghostline was doing his job, he was documenting the unloading right now. If she acted before the documentation was complete, she destroyed the evidence. If she waited until the documentation was complete, the files moved, and names burned. She keyed her radio. Graves, the relay cache. If I destroy the signal station after the convoy documents are logged, does the cache survive? Silence. Then, the Strident unit has an internal memory module. If it's been logging tonight's activity, the cache would survive physical destruction of the external hardware. The module itself is hardened. A pause. But you would need to physically extract it. How big is it? The size of a thumb drive. She looked toward track 19. She would need to get inside the boxcar, into the signal station, pull the cache module from the Strident unit, and then destroy everything else. All of this while a convoy was 20 meters away in the maintenance shed, and a man in a long coat was standing at the yard gate, and a former CIA counter-intel operative was watching from somewhere in the dark. And she looked at the shed, maybe 12 minutes before the unloading was complete and the files were ready to move. Graves, she said, I need to know one thing. Ask. If I pull that module and get out of this yard, is there someone you can get it to? Someone who isn't connected to the people who sent me here? A long pause, the longest pause of the night. Yes, he said, there is one person. That's enough, she said. She began moving toward track 19. She was 40 yards from the boxcar when she heard him. Not a sound, an absence of one. The specific quality of silence that meant something nearby had stopped moving. Something that had been moving and had stopped because it was watching her. She stopped, did not raise her rifle, did not look directly at the angle the silence had come from, north-northeast, somewhere in the gap between track 18 and 19. She waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then from the north-northeast gap, a figure stepped into the open space between car rows. He was standing in the open, no cover, no weapon raised. He could see her clearly and she could see him. Not well, the pre-dawn light was still thin and gray, but enough. Large, long coat. The slight favoring of the left leg she had noticed in the boot print at Dead Zone 5. He stood in the open for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked north, away from the boxcar on track 19. She understood. He had been there first. He had already pulled the cache module, or he was leaving it for her to pull. Either way, he was moving away from the boxcar, and in doing so, he was telling her, "It's yours." He had just decided she was not the enemy, not with words, not with gesture, with the precise language of two professionals in a dark yard who had been watching each other long enough to know what the other was doing and why. She watched him go, noted the favored leg, filed it. Then she moved to the boxcar. She was inside the car when the first explosion went off. Not large, not the kind of explosion that flattened structures, the kind that destroyed specific hardware. A shaped charge, she thought, detonating somewhere in the maintenance shed. The blast was focused and the sound was sharp rather than rolling. Then, 6 seconds later, a second explosion. This one was bigger. It caught something flammable. The hydraulic fluid from the yellow drum maybe, or fuel stored in the shed. And the secondary fireball lit the yard in orange and white. She felt the heat pulse through the boxcar's thin walls. She had the Strident unit's front panel open. She was looking for the cache module housing, a small access bay on the left side, secured with 2 thumbscrews. She found it. Her hands were steady. She worked the thumbscrews. Outside, shouts. The convoy personnel had heard the explosion. She heard vehicle engines starting, the crunch of gravel under heavy tires as someone tried to move the trucks. A third explosion, this one from the east boundary, near the maintenance gantry. She felt the yard shudder. Then a sound she had never heard before but recognized from training, the deep groan of a large steel structure losing its load-bearing integrity. The number 2 crane was going down. It went slowly. That was the terrible thing about it. The groan built over 4 or 5 seconds, a sound like a mountain considering a decision, and then the structure tipped and fell. The impact when it hit sent a shockwave through the ground that she felt in her knees and in her teeth, and the sound was enormous. A single catastrophic collision of steel on steel that rang out across the flat farmland and would have been audible for miles. The yard erupted. Rail cars lurched on loosened tracks. The signal tower, her original position, swayed visibly. 2 of the cargo trucks had their windows blown in by the pressure wave from the crane's impact. Somewhere a fuel line had ruptured because she could smell diesel heavy in the air. She had the cash module free, thumbnail-sized, matte gray, no markings. She pocketed it. She closed the boxcar door and dropped to the ground. The yard was transformed. The clear sight lines she had mapped were gone. The crane's fall had collapsed sections of track infrastructure, pushed rail cars off their positions, created new walls and gaps where none had existed before. The dust and debris raised by the collapse hung in the air, thick enough to cut visibility by half. She began moving. She found him at the south boundary, near the base of the collapsed crane. He was not hiding. He was standing in the open, looking at the yard, and he had his rifle slung across his back in the carry position. Not a fighting posture. The fire from the maintenance shed had risen high enough to backlight everything in orange, and she could see him clearly for the first time. She stopped 20 yards away. He turned and looked at her. Neither of them raised a weapon. Above them, the command drone that had been orbiting the yard since 0430, she had tracked it intermittently on her secondary scanner, came in low, banking in the thermal updraft from the fire. It was a surveillance drone, not armed, but it was recording, and it was transmitting that recording to whoever had deployed it. She looked at him. He looked at the drone. She unslung her rifle. He unslung his. Not at each other. In unison, both of them raised their weapons and tracked the drone as it banked west. It was flying a standard surveillance pattern, predictable. She had the lead angle in 2 seconds. She looked at him. He nodded slightly. She squeezed the trigger. Her shot took the drone's sensor array. His shot, half a second later, took the propulsion housing. The drone dropped straight down and hit a flat car roof with a flat metallic crack. The recording stopped transmitting. In the silence that followed, she lowered her rifle. He lowered his. He reached into his coat and held something out to her. Not a weapon. A small device. A secondary memory card, she thought. He held it for a moment, then set it on the flat car beside him and stepped back. She moved forward and picked it up. Additional documentation. Supplementary files. Whatever he had been able to pull from the signal station or had compiled over 14 months in this yard. She looked at him. He looked at her. The fire from Shed Alpha had reached its peak and was beginning to fall. Orange light moved across the yard in long, shifting shadows. He turned and walked into the darkness of the freight car maze. She watched him go. Left leg, the slight favoring. She thought about the boot print in Dead Zone 5. 12 hours ago, she had been hunting a shadow. Now she was watching a man walk away in firelight, carrying 14 months of evidence in whatever form he could carry it. And she found she had no desire at all to stop him. She pocketed the memory card beside the cache module. 2 pieces of evidence, a dead man's paper and key, a yard full of burning documentation. In the convoy, somewhere in the chaos, trying to decide whether to run or hold. She keyed her radio. "Graves," she said. "I'm out of the labyrinth. Tell me where to go." "Graves," she said. "I'm out of the labyrinth. Tell me where to go." "East boundary. There's a maintenance access road running parallel to the fence. County easement, unpaved, not on the yard's official survey. It runs north to a culvert crossing under the county road. From there you can reach my extraction contact." "I'm not extracting yet." A pause. "Carter, the signal station is still running. The relay cache has the convoy documentation, but the Strident unit is still transmitting. As long as it's active, whoever is running this operation can monitor what it contains. They can wipe it remotely. You have the physical module. The module is a backup. The primary record is in the relay system. If they wipe it before we can get the module to your contact, we lose the chain of custody. The module alone won't be enough. It needs to match the relay log." Silence on the other end. "Then, what are you going to do?" She was already moving north through the burning yard. The fire from Shed Alpha had spread to the maintenance shed's roof, and the orange light it cast turned the freight cars into columns of shadow and flame. The air was thick with diesel smoke and the smell of burning plastic from the electronics cases inside. The man in the long coat was no longer at the gate. She had watched him retreat to the SUV when the first explosion went off. The SUV had not moved. It was still idling at the eastern gate, its lights on, engine running, waiting. She thought about that. A man who stayed near the scene rather than running. A man with enough confidence in his position to wait out an incident rather than flee. That confidence came from one thing. He believed the institutional cover around this operation was solid enough to absorb whatever was happening tonight. She needed to break that belief. "I'm going to destroy the signal station," she said. "Not the module, the whole physical relay. The Strident unit, the satellite transceiver, all of it. When it goes dark, the remote wipe capability goes with it. The cache module becomes the only record." And the man at the gate? He watches his operation burn and understands that someone knows. That someone has the evidence and it's already moving. She paused. That's the part that matters, not just the evidence. His understanding that the evidence exists and is out of his reach. Graves was quiet for a moment. "Carter, the boxcar is 20 meters from an active fire. If you set charges—" "I'm not setting charges. I'm going to use what's already burning." She had been watching the fire's behavior for the last 4 minutes. The shed fire was spreading north and east, toward the freight car lines on track 17 and 18. The wind was moving it. In approximately 8 minutes at its current rate of spread, the fire would reach the cars on track 18. Track 19, where the signal boxcar sat, was 1 row further east. She needed to accelerate that spread by approximately 6 minutes. She found the fuel drum, the yellow one Ghostline had shot earlier, already leaking from the entry hole. She rolled it on its side, pushing it north along the ground between the car rows. It was heavy and awkward, and she worked quickly, keeping low, staying in the shadow of the freight cars. She positioned the drum at the junction of track 17 and 18, the point where the fire's natural spread would pass, and used her knife to open the leak point wider. Diesel poured across the gravel in a spreading dark pool. She did not need to light it. The fire from the shed would do that. She backed away 20 yards and waited. 45 seconds. The pool of diesel caught. Not explosively. A low, fast-traveling line of flame that ran back along the fuel trail toward the shed, and simultaneously spread outward across the gravel, reaching the base of the track 18 cars and climbing the wooden underframe sections that remained on the older rolling stock. Track 18 began to burn. She had 90 seconds before track 19 went. She moved to the boxcar, worked the door, and pulled it open fully. Inside, the Strident unit's indicators were still active, still logging, still transmitting. The satellite transceiver's green light pulsed steadily. The laptop screen showed a data transfer in progress. She pulled the laptop's power cable and threw it into the far corner of the car. Then she located the Strident unit's primary power coupling, a thick, braided cable running from the back of the unit to a portable power pack on the shelf below, and disconnected it. The indicators went dark. The unit was no longer transmitting. Remote wipe was no longer possible. She looked at the transceiver. Its green light had gone amber, searching for a signal it was no longer receiving from the now dark relay unit. In 30 seconds, it would go to standby. After that, it was just hardware. She closed the boxcar door and walked away from track 19 at a pace that was not a run. 60 feet from the car, she heard the fire reach it, the creak of the wooden underframe catching, then the low roar of ignition spreading along the car's lower surfaces. She did not look back. She was already moving toward the eastern fence. Behind her, the signal station's hardware burned. The cache module was in her left cargo pocket. The supplementary memory card Ghostline had left on the flat car was in her right. She moved through the gap in the eastern fence and onto the maintenance access road. She was 200 yards north on the access road when the vehicles appeared. Three of them, moving fast on the county road from the north, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gray, the silhouette profile of military utility trucks. They turned at the yard's north entrance, and she heard the gate come down. Not the careful operation of someone managing entry, but the flat crash of a vehicle pushing through it. Her radio crackled, a frequency she didn't recognize. Not her assigned channel, not the narrowband scanner frequency, a broad military broadcast. All units, hostile contact at Harmon Terminal, asset compromise, authorized response, all available personnel, designation, rogue operator. She stopped walking. Rogue operator. The words had a specific meaning in the institutional framework she had spent 8 years operating within. They meant a subject was no longer under command authority, was considered armed and dangerous, and could be engaged without the standard escalation protocols. They were words that closed doors, words that converted a soldier into a problem. She had known this was coming. Graves had told her it was coming. The institutional cover around this operation needed a story, and the story required a rogue actor to explain the burning maintenance shed, the dead courier, the destroyed signal station. She was the rogue actor. She keyed her primary radio. Graves, they've designated me hostile. 3 response vehicles entering the north yard. I know, I'm watching it happen. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger beneath it. Carter, listen carefully. Do not engage those vehicles. Do not return fire under any circumstances. The moment you fire on U.S. military assets, the designation becomes unchallengeable. I know. The access road you're on, follow it north 200 meters. There is a culvert crossing under the county road. On the far side, a gray civilian pickup is parked at the field access track. The driver's name is Renner. He knows to expect you. Who is Renner? Someone I trust. He's going to take the module and the card and be gone before those response vehicles get through the yard. She was already moving. The sounds from the yard behind her were a complex mix. The fire, still burning, vehicle engines, shouted commands. She could hear the response team working through the freight car lines, clearing sector by sector. They were moving efficiently. They had a map of the yard, or someone who knew it. She thought about the man in the long coat, the way he had made 2 phone calls when the convoy arrived. The second one, the one on the second phone, had probably been to whatever contact he had in the military response chain, calling in the rogue designation before the smoke had even settled. A man who planned ahead, who had the institutional levers already in hand when he needed them. She reached the culvert at a jog. The drainage tunnel was 4 feet in diameter, running under the county road's gravel bed. She went through it on hands and knees, came up on the far side into fallow farmland, and stood. The gray pickup was there. A man leaned against the driver's door. 50-something, square build, the patient stillness of someone who had waited in worse places than a farm access track at 5 in the morning. He looked at her without visible surprise. Renner, she said. Carter, he held out his hand. She placed the cash module and the memory card in his palm. He closed his fingers around them and put them in his jacket pocket without looking at them. Then he opened the truck door and got in. Graves says you're not coming with me, Renner said through the window. Not yet. He looked at her steadily for a moment. Whatever he was assessing, he appeared to reach a conclusion. 48 hours, he said. After that, the window closes. I understand. He drove north on the farm track without lights, moving by the pale gray of pre-dawn, and disappeared around a field boundary. She stood at the culvert and looked back toward the yard. The fire was visible from here, orange above the tree line, smoke rising black against the lightning sky. The response vehicle's headlights moved through the freight car grid in the systematic pattern of a clearing operation. They were looking for her. She went back through the culvert. She found a hide position in the maintenance tunnel, Tunnel 1, the northernmost, which she had not used before and which the response team had not yet reached in their clearing pattern. She pulled the hatch closed above her and lay in the dark concrete space and thought. She had one asset left in play, Graves. She keyed the radio. Talk to me. The response team is from Fort Whitmore, Regional Security Command. 12 personnel, 2 with tracking equipment. A pause. The rogue designation was filed 23 minutes ago. Filed from within the DOD, not from a field commander. Someone at a desk made that call before the convoy even reached the yard. Pre-positioned paperwork, she said. Yes, which means it was always part of the plan. If tonight's operation went wrong, if anyone survived and could talk, the rogue designation was ready to deploy. His voice was tired. Carter, I've been on the phone for the last 40 minutes. I have 3 contacts I've reached. One is a congressional staff investigator on the Armed Services Committee. One is an Inspector General's office contact I've used once before. One is a journalist, retired military, national security beat, the kind who checks everything twice. Who has the module? Renner is en route. He'll reach the investigator's office when it opens in, he checked, 4 hours and 12 minutes. And until then? Until then, the designation stands, and you are inside a burning freight yard with 12 response personnel who have been told you are hostile. A pause. I need you to stay alive for 4 hours, Carter. I've done more with less. You've done more with more. This is the less situation. She could hear him breathing, the careful, controlled breathing of a man managing worry with discipline. Carter, what you did tonight, pulling that module, getting it out, that was the right call. I want you to know I believe that. She lay in the dark tunnel and listened to the drip of groundwater along the concrete floor. The man at the gate, she said. Who is he? A pause. I don't have a confirmed identity yet, but based on the foreign commercial entity's known operatives and the operational parameters of tonight, I have a strong candidate. Former State Department contractor, current private intelligence consultancy principal. Another pause. He'll be gone from that gate before the response team finishes clearing the yard. Men like him don't stay for the cleanup. He'll claim he was never there. Yes, and without the relay log to place him, Graves stopped. Actually, the relay log is gone. But the convoy vehicles entered the yard. They'll be on whatever satellite coverage was over this county tonight. The drone we shot down? Yes, but that was one asset. NRO maintains independent coverage on active military areas. If someone pulls the satellite imagery for this county between 0400 and 0600, the convoy vehicles are in it. The convoy vehicles, the man at the gate, and the SUV, all of it. His voice picked up slightly. That's not nothing, Carter. That's corroborating evidence for what's on the module. She thought about the 4 hours she needed to stay alive, about the 12 response personnel with tracking equipment working through the yard. Can you slow them down? She asked. I'm working on it. The congressional contact has enough standing to make a phone call to the response team's command authority. It won't stop the operation, but it may put enough doubt in the commanding officer's mind to affect the pace. He paused. It buys you time, not safety, time. That's all I need. She lay still in the tunnel and listened to the yard above her. She heard him at 0611. She had moved twice since the tunnel, once when the response team's sweep came within 40 yards of her position, once when a vehicle swept its lights across the area. She was now in the interior of a covered hopper on track 3, in the far north end of the yard, as far from the active search as she could get. The hopper's interior was cold and smelled of old grain dust. She lay along the car's curved floor and listened. The sound that told her he was near was not a footstep. It was the absence of the response team's activity in a specific sector, a pocket of quiet that moved with the deliberate pace of someone navigating around search teams. She tracked it by the shape of its silence. He appeared at the hopper's north end door, not entering, just standing at the gap, visible against the gray, early morning light. The fire had died down to a low, sustained burn. In its diminished orange light, she could see him more clearly than she had seen him all night. Tall, late 40s maybe, the long insulated coat. The way he stood with his weight slightly off the left leg, not dramatically, but present. The boot print in Dead Zone 5, the silhouette on track 19, the shape on the flat car, the south boundary. He looked at her. She looked at him. He held up one hand, palm out, fingers spread. Not a wave, a count. He closed his fist, then extended 3 fingers. 3 hours. She understood. He had the same information she had, or similar. He knew the window. He was telling her, 3 hours until the institutional intervention reaches the response team, until the commanding officer gets a phone call that gives him pause, until the pace of the clearing operation slows enough that she can move. He also had, she realized, nowhere to go. He was in the same yard, under the same designation, or would be when the response team found evidence of his presence. 2 snipers, both inside the wire, both outside the official story. She held up the cache module briefly, showed it to him through the hopper door gap. He nodded once. She put it back in her pocket. He reached into his coat and produced a small radio, a compact civilian unit, not military, and set it on the floor of the hopper just inside the door. Then he straightened and looked at her again. Whatever the radio meant, a shared frequency, a way to coordinate during the next 3 hours, she understood it as the last operational gesture between 2 people who had been on opposite sides of the same board all night and had arrived at the same square. She picked up the radio. He turned. The slight favoring of the left leg, the deliberate, unhurried pace of a man who had been patient in difficult places for a very long time. He walked into the freight car maze and was gone. She held the radio in both hands and thought about everything it represented. The 14 months he had spent in this yard, the operational discipline required to stay invisible for that long, the choice to kill Harwick and the choice not to kill her. The math of a professional who had made every calculation correctly and arrived at a burning freight yard at dawn with nothing but a radio to give a stranger. She thought about what Graves had said. The soldier who understands the chessboard is more dangerous than the soldier who doesn't. Ghostline had understood the board longer than anyone. She set the radio to the frequency she assumed he intended, the same narrowband channel he had used to transmit the single word earlier, and waited. The phone call reached the response team's commanding officer at 0714. She knew it because the search pattern changed. The systematic grid clearing, sector by sector, methodical, aggressive, shifted. The vehicles stopped moving. She could hear faintly the sound of radio communication between personnel, the kind of back and forth that happened when orders were being questioned and re-questioned. The pace did not stop, but it changed character. It became the pace of men who had been told to be careful. Men who had been told that the situation was more complicated than the designation suggested. At 0731, Graves came back on. The congressional contact made the call. The Inspector General's office has opened a preliminary inquiry into the mission orders, the fraudulent use of Harold's credentials. That's enough to put the commanding officer in a position where aggressive action against you creates personal, legal exposure for him. A pause. He's going to hold position and wait for clarification from his command authority. How long does clarification take? Long enough. A pause. Carter, Renner delivered the module 20 minutes ago. The investigator has it. The journalist has been briefed. No specifics, just enough to know there's a story and that it involves tonight's events. Chain of custody is established. She could hear the relief in his voice, the careful kind that didn't celebrate prematurely. The window is open. I need you moving toward the extraction point in the next 15 minutes. The North Access Road? Yes, a vehicle is staged at the County Road junction. Not Renner, different driver, clean. It will take you to a location where we can talk on a secure line. A pause. Carter, are you injured? She ran a quick inventory. Cold, tired, a shallow cut on her left palm from the hopper door edge she had forgotten about. Knees bruised from tunnel work. Nothing that slowed movement. No. Then go. She moved through the north sector of the yard in the gray morning light. The response team was holding position in the central yard. She could see their vehicles from elevated positions she used to check her route. They were not moving toward her. She passed the signal tower. It was still standing, her original position, the cab still showing the entry and exit holes from Ghost Line's probe shot. She looked at the hole in the east wall, 6 inches from where her head had been. She kept moving. At the north fence, the padlock on the access gate was standard commercial. She was through it in 40 seconds. The access road north to the county junction was 300 yards. She walked it in the open, no cover, the sky light enough now that she was fully visible to anyone watching. She did not run. Running was what frightened people did. She walked with the measured pace of a professional who had completed an assignment and was leaving the area. At the county road junction, a dark blue sedan idled on the gravel shoulder. The driver was a woman, 30s, civilian clothes, the kind of deliberate ordinariness that was itself a form of professional concealment. Carter got in. The driver pulled onto the county road heading north without speaking. Behind them, the Harmon terminal burned in the flat Midwest morning, black smoke against a pale sky. The freight cars stood in their rows, the maze intact, the dead signal tower at the center. From a distance, it looked like any abandoned yard, inert, forgotten, indifferent to what had happened in its corridors between midnight and dawn. She put her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She was thinking about the man in the long coat, who was no longer at the gate, about where men like that went when their operations collapsed. Not to prison, not immediately. They went sideways, into adjacent structures, into the next institutional arrangement. They didn't stop. They relocated. But she had the module. Renner had the module. The investigator had the module. The journalist knew there was a story. The satellite imagery existed. The chain was built. It was not enough to end it, but it was enough to make it harder. And harder was the best outcome available in a world where the people running the operations also ran the oversight mechanisms. She thought about what Graves had said the year she first worked under him, when she was 22 years old and still believed that institutions were fundamentally sound and that the right outcome was guaranteed if you did the right thing. The institution is not the mission, he had told her. Sometimes it's the obstacle. She opened her eyes and watched the flat farmland pass. The after-action report was filed at 1400 hours. She read it 3 days later at a location she was not going to name, through a connection she was not going to describe, in a document she was not supposed to have. Incident summary, Harmon Terminal, November 9th. Successful interdiction of unauthorized intelligence transfer operation. Hostile elements neutralized. 1 DIA officer deceased. Cause, Hostile action by unknown paramilitary element. Facility damage attributed to hostile sabotage. Responding assets performed within operational parameters. Investigation ongoing into origin of hostile elements. One paragraph, 6 sentences. A clean box around a night that had contained none of these things. Thomas Harwick, 11 years at DIA, a man who had tried to stop something and been killed for it, was one DIA officer deceased. Cause, hostile action by unknown paramilitary element. The men in the aluminum cases were hostile elements neutralized, though she knew from Graves that they had fled the yard before the response team arrived and had not been apprehended. The man in the long coat was not mentioned. She was not mentioned. The signal station, the convoy, the 14 months of documented intelligence transfers, none of it existed in the report. She set it down and thought about the difference between what a document said and what had happened, about the way institutional language worked, not to describe events, but to manage them, to fit them into shapes that served the needs of the people writing the sentences. The report was not a lie in the way that a person lying was a lie. It was a structural redirection, a door sealed with the right paperwork. She thought about Graves telling her the institutional cover was solid enough to absorb tonight. He had been right about that, in the immediate sense. The cover was holding. But the module was moving through the system. The investigator was working. The journalist was asking questions that people with something to hide were going to need to answer eventually. Solid cover had gaps, and gaps, given time and pressure, became doors. She wrote the account on her 4th day out. She used a legal pad and a ballpoint pen. No devices, no network, nothing that connected to anything. She wrote in longhand, slowly, the way her 2nd-grade teacher had taught her to write when she wanted to remember something. Her handwriting was not elegant, but it was precise. She wrote everything: the arrival at the yard, the civilians and their movement patterns, the probe shots and what they told her about the shooter, the courier and his dark blue coat and the way he had fallen, the signal station in the boxcar, the strident unit's pulsing indicators, the relay cache module in her left cargo pocket, and the supplementary card in her right. She wrote about Graves, not his identity, not his contacts, but his voice at 4 in the morning when he understood the full shape of what they were inside. The way he had said the soldier who understands the chessboard as if it were something he believed absolutely and had always believed. She wrote about Ghostline. She wrote about the way he had stood in the open on track 19 and walked away. The 2 parallel casings placed neatly at the edge of the hopper roof. The single word on the narrowband frequency. The radio left on the hopper floor. She wrote, "He was not protecting the operation. He was documenting it. There is a difference. He stayed in that yard for 14 months because he was waiting for the moment when the documentation was complete enough to matter. He was patient in a way that is only possible when you understand exactly what you are waiting for." She stopped, looked at the legal pad, then wrote, "I do not know his name. I know his boot print and the way he stands, and the fact that he places his casings parallel rather than leaving them where they fall. I know that at 60 yards with a clear shot, he chose not to shoot. Someone should know it happened, even if no one acts on it, even if the report says something else. Someone should know." She set the pen down. That was the thing she had learned in the Harmon terminal. Not a tactical lesson. The thing underneath all the procedure. Every battlefield had another war inside it. The visible one, with its fire and its probe shots and its response vehicles. And the invisible one, which was about what the record said and who got to write it. She had spent her career in the visible war. She was beginning to understand the other one. She folded the pages, placed them in an envelope, and addressed it to the person Graves had named. She was not certain anything would come of it. She was certain that the pages should exist. Graves called on the 6th day. She was in a motel in a small city whose name she did not intend to record. She had been sleeping properly for 2 days, the deep, dreamless sleep of someone whose body had been running on adrenaline and cold and had finally been allowed to stop. She had eaten real food. She had walked beside a river in the afternoon and watched a freight train pass on the far bank, its cars moving in a long, slow line, and had felt nothing complicated about it. The phone rang at 800, the secure line Graves used when he needed to talk without the institutional apparatus listening. "How are you?" he said. "Better. The investigator has filed a preliminary brief with the committee, classified for now, but it's in the system." A pause. "The journalist has found 2 corroborating sources, people who knew about the operation and are willing to talk obliquely. Nothing published yet. Could be weeks, could be months. And the rogue designation? Suspended pending review, which is not the same as cleared, but it means they're not actively looking for you." His voice was careful. "For now." She thought about "for now," about the man in the long coat in his next arrangement, in his next structure, making his next set of phone calls, about the way systems protected themselves. "Graves," she said, "ghost line. Do you know where he is?" A pause. "I have an idea. Why?" "Because whatever he built in that yard over 14 months, whatever is on those supplementary files he gave me, it's more complete than anything I was able to pull from the relay. He was there for the whole operation. I was there for one night. Yes. If this goes to a real investigation, a proper one, not a preliminary brief, they're going to need a witness who was present for the full timeline." "They're going to need him," Graves said. "Yes." Another long pause, the kind that meant he was thinking about something he had already been thinking about. "I'll make some inquiries," he said. She looked out the motel window at the river. A barge was moving south, slow and heavy, riding low in the water with whatever it carried. She thought about freight and cargo and the things that move through the country's infrastructure without anyone asking too many questions. "There's something else," Graves said. She waited. "I've been looking at a situation in the Pacific Northwest. Industrial port facility, private security contract, some anomalous activity in the last 90 days that doesn't fit the pattern of legitimate port operations." He paused. "Different actors, different methodology, but the architecture looks familiar." She thought about the 3 circles she had drawn in her notebook, the way a foreign commercial entity and a domestic corruption source and an institutional blind spot could combine into something that was very hard to see clearly until you were inside it. "Same kind of war," she said. "Same kind of war," Graves agreed. "Different terrain." She looked at the barge moving south on the river, at the freight cars on the far bank, still and patient on their tracks, at the flat gray sky above the water. "When?" she said. "When you're ready." She thought about the legal pad pages in the envelope, about the cash module in an investigator's office, about a man with a slight limp walking into a freight car maze at dawn with nothing but patience and a 14-month record of what had actually happened. She thought about the visible war and the invisible one, about which one she was in now. "Give me 2 days," she said. "Take 3, Graves said. "You earned it." She set the phone down and looked at the river for a long time. The barge moved south. The freight cars sat still. The sky stayed gray. Somewhere in a Pacific Northwest port facility, something was not what it appeared to be. She would be ready.